because it's always a privilege to be able to stand up in front of this church and share what God has put on our hearts. And Barry said, listen, we're going to do a series called Wise Up, and we're going to talk about wisdom. And I said, Barry, I'd rather talk about anything else under the sun than wisdom. Because it's amazing how when you have to start putting a message together, it happens to be all the stuff you struggle with. And so when it comes to making good choices, it's tough sometimes. And so when it comes to the book of Proverbs, Proverbs is just an amazing book. I mean, if you've read through it, if you've looked at it, the way it tells you it teaches you how to handle foolish people. It teaches you how to control your mouth and how you respond and what stirs up anger in people and what doesn't stir up anger in people. And the fact that God put 31 chapters in there, because most months have 31 days. So if you're looking for a great way to start a family devotional or your own quiet time, Proverbs is a great way to do that, because one thing me and my boys have started to do is when we go to the bus stop, we'll take out my phone and we'll look up the proverb that kind of lines up with the day of the week it is, or the day of the month. So if it's the 12th of May, we'll look up the 12th chapter, and then when the 13th, we read the 13th chapter, and so on. But it's just been a great time for us to talk, and you would think I asked them to read War and Peace and write me a 50-page report on it by the way they respond. But, really, we got to read it again, but I think they secretly love it. They enjoy spending time, and it's fun to ask them, what do you think this verse means? What do you think how you're supposed to listen to this? Oh, you're supposed to talk nice to your brother and sister. Oh, you got it. So it's just a great way for us as a family. So, if you're starting and trying to figure something out, Proverbs would be a great one to start in. But let me challenge you, kind of scan through it a little bit, because you may have to have the talk sooner you plan on having to talk. Some of it gets a little risque, but it's just an amazing book. It's just an amazing book that tells us how to deal with wisdom. And so as I started to put this topic together, one thing I wanted to say before we move on is we need to understand wisdom is not knowledge. So you and I, we can have wisdom or we can have knowledge, but it's not wisdom. And one of the best ways I've heard knowledge and wisdom described is knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it into a fruit salad. And so when it comes to how do we handle wisdom and how do we handle those things, it's huge, because as a society, as a culture, we have so much knowledge available to us. Most of the times we walk around with a device in our pocket or our purse that allows us to get answers within a second. And let me tell you this, it is not a good idea to buy a new cell phone the same weekend you're supposed to be preaching, all right, because you won't want to study very much. I've been playing on my new cell phone for a couple days, and I'm just amazed that it can read my thumbprint and open up. You know how much time that's going to save me? Like 3 minutes throughout my life. I mean, it's just amazing what technology can do for you and I. And I was trying to explain to my boys, Landon had to write a research paper and get all this stuff. And you know what they have to do? They go to the computer, they Google it, and you got a million resources. Do you remember how it was for us when we had to write a paper? Oh my goodness, you had your table was just full of books, encyclopedias. You had to actually go to the library, and you had to get there before everyone else did, or you'd be doing the horrible topics that no one wanted to do so you could get some resources. And then you had to handwrite everything. There was no cut and paste. So you had to handwrite on all your cue cards. You were just up a creek if you misplaced one of them, because you could never find where you got the resource from. It was a part-time job putting a term paper or a research paper together. It took so much work, and now all we got to do is Google something, and you get a million resources in front of you in a second, and you just cut and paste them, and they're there. If you were in trouble if you accidentally hit the wrong letter on a typewriter. I mean, it just messed your day up. And so the way technology has changed, and so as I started to think about this, I just started to think about all the exciting things that we have seen happen literally just over a short amount of time. Do you remember when we were kids, if we wanted to see a sports score, or if you followed a sports team, you most likely had to wait until the next day when it was in the newspaper to know what the score was. And you were in big trouble if your team played a night game on the West Coast. It'd be 2 days before you could find out what the score was. It's just amazing how much has changed. I remember the first time I saw cable. When I watched cable, we were at a friend's house, and they had cable, and we were just like in awe. You mean you don't have to worry about rabbit ears? You don't have to worry about antennas? You don't have to worry about changing channels with a big clunk, 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 clunk on the side of the TV? You could just watch TV? It was amazing. And then they had like the A side and the B side. I don't know how it was in everywhere else, but in Massachusetts, that's how it was. There was a big old box that was about the size of your TV, on your TV. I mean, it was just amazing. And I was mostly excited because they had the Disney Channel. Now you have like 15 Disney channels. And Rin Tin Tin was on. I mean, it was amazing. You know, it was awesome. And so to have cable, how about this, parents? How many of you wish your kids could experience Saturday morning cartoons? I mean, such fond memories. I mean, we loved waking up on Saturday morning, sitting down for like 6 hours and just watching cartoons all day because we did not have the Cartoon Network. You only got to watch cartoons for a certain amount of time, and then you had to choose, do I want to watch the Smurfs or do I want to watch the Snorkels? I mean, you had to choose which one you were going to watch, or do I want to watch the Justice League? I mean, because we didn't have TiVo, you couldn't record 15 things at once, you know, and so you had to choose and strategically plan your morning. I mean, it was just a great time. How about this? Do you remember when VCRs came out? How crazy was that? We stood in line for 5 hours to get E.T. Forever. Now you go to the movies, you get out, and 5 hours later, it's on DVD. You know, I mean, it took us like 6 years to get a movie on VCR. The way technology has changed is amazing. I remember when my friend started to explain the internet to me. And the only thing I cared about was, so we can get sports scores right as they're happening? You know, you mean we can talk to people on the other side of the world and trying to wrap our heads around that. And now we carry all that around in our pockets. You can literally watch TV. You could write a research paper. I mean, the amount of technology we have and the amount of knowledge that is at our fingertips is amazing. And what's amazing, that knowledge comes with amazing benefits, but it also comes with huge consequences if it's not used properly. And so, again, knowledge is not wisdom. And when we start to experience knowledge, it changes the way you think. It changes the way you live your life. Just look at Adam and Eve. When they experienced sin, and when they learned what sin was, and when their eyes were opened and the knowledge was received to what sin was, it changed everything they did. There's consequences everywhere. I remember the first time I realized our family, growing up, my family struggled financially. You know, I have a funny joke just popped in my head thinking, well, the way you find out is if you get your haircuts at Walmart or not. But anyways, that wasn't my notes. Sorry, just rabbit trail. Anyways, I came up one morning. I came home from school, and I said, am I going to Cub Scouts today? And my mom said, no, you're not going to Cub Scouts. So I was like every 11-year-old, was upset, frustrated, was being a knucklehead, and was whining and complaining. And my mom said, listen, the car got repossessed. We have no way to get there. And it changed the way I viewed everything. It changed the way I asked for stuff. It changed the way I responded to stuff. It changed the way I viewed my family. I mean, your eyes were open to things that weren't there before. Do you remember when we were kids? When you wanted to play with a friend, what did you do? You went out your front door, you went 2 or 3 houses down, and you knocked on someone else's door. It was amazing. Today you could get arrested for that. I mean, it's just amazing the way it was. You could go to a friend's house, you knock on the door, invite someone to come out and play, you know, or you could call me, and you have to go through like 3 layers of defense. You know, my mom would answer the phone, and then my dad would pick up the phone to see who was on the phone, then my brother would get on the phone to mess with you a little bit more, and then the phone could only go 3 feet from the wall because it was on a cord, all right? And so if I got the message, you know, then I could get to the phone. But if you got a busy signal, it could be days before we talked. I mean, the dreaded busy signal. No call waiting. You just waited. And so, you know, do you remember the time when you found out your friends were doing something and you weren't invited? And the pit that it put in your stomach, thinking, you know what? They didn't think of me. They left me out. And the hurt it caused you. Well, let me tell you something. Teenagers and kids now are living with that nonstop. Because with social media, they have everything at their fingertips. I can literally tell what you're doing just about up to the minute if I'm following you. And I'm sure you have heard that I have taken social media by storm. All right, I am now on Instagram. I am now on Twitter. I am now cool. All right, because I have taken over to young adults, and they were clear when they said, listen, you cannot be a part of this ministry if you don't have an Instagram account. So they set me up an Instagram account, and the only thing I care about with my Instagram account is that I have more followers than Garrett Witt, our AVL guy. That's it. You know, I barely know how to use the thing. I don't know how to really send out pictures. And let me say this, too. If you have an Instagram account and you send out pictures of your food, no one cares. Have you ever seen someone grab a Polaroid, snap a picture of their dinner, shake that bad boy, and show someone else? No. We've never cared about it. All right, so now for some reason everyone cares about what you're having for dinner. All right, and so Instagram has made it so easy for us to see what everyone else's life is made of. And we see the glamorous snapshots. We see the highlights of everyone else's life. And what we end up thinking, especially teenagers today, is, well, my life stinks compared to that. I'm missing out on everything. Everybody else is having fun but me. And we wonder why they're so stressed out and anxious all the time. They have so much knowledge. We have so much knowledge at our fingertips. And to be honest, we don't know how to use half of it. And so as we start to look at this chapter and we start to understand how having knowledge is not having wisdom. Because if that was the case, we should be some of the wisest generation or the wisest group of people that have ever walked the earth. And you don't have to watch the news for long to realize that's not the case. All right? We are, again, this is just my opinion, not Park Values. It's not something wrong. I think people are struggling. I think our leaders are struggling. I think as a society we're struggling in some cases. And it's just a mess. And you would think with all the knowledge we have, we should be making some of the wisest choices out there. And people aren't. And Solomon gave us an amazing roadmap on how to make wise choices. And here it is. If you look in verse 3 of Proverbs 2, it says this: every young man who listens to me and obeys my instructions will be given wisdom and good sense. Yes, if you want better insight and discernment and are searching for them as you would lost money or hidden treasure, then wisdom will be given to you and knowledge of God himself. You will soon learn the importance of the reverence for the Lord and trust him. And so what this is saying, that three words, searching for them. Listen, we need to be searching for God. Because if I were to sit here and say, hey, listen, I put a $1,000 gift card under one of these seats in here, this place would be torn apart looking for that gift card. We do that for T-shirts. You know, and God said, listen, you need to search after me as if you lost money or a lost treasure. You know, if we lose something of value, we look for it. If you lost your car keys, if you lost your wallet, you would look for it. A couple weeks ago, we misplaced a check, and we were looking for it, and we were digging through the trash for it because, you know what? I valued that check. I wanted to cash that bad boy, all right? And so I was willing to dig through the trash for it, you know, because it has value. If in our house we lose the remote control, everything else stops until we find it, all right? Because we value that piece of plastic, all right? And so I don't know how we lose it because you're sitting on a couch and it should be left right there. But, you know, you would think it shouldn't be too far, but somehow it ends 3 levels up in a different room. You know, that's a whole nother message too. But when it comes to, we search for the things that we value. And so often they are literally right in front of us. So often they are right there for us to grab. And I'm trying not to get a case of the giggles right now because my son's laughing in the front row because he knows it's true. All right? We so often life is right there in front of us, and we're searching for it. And we're missing it because we're focused on so many other things. So here's what we're going to do real quick. We're going to take an awareness test. All right? I want you to watch this video, and then we're going to talk about it in a moment, okay? All right, before you ask, yes, that moonwalking bear was in the first clip we saw. All right, so let me ask you, how many of you guys saw him the first time around? Anybody? Wow. How many of you guys got 13 right? All right, how many of you missed the bear and got the number wrong? All right. Listen, honesty is the first step to recovery, all right? Listen, there could be a moonwalking bear right in front of us, and we're focused on the wrong thing just because someone said, hey, look at that. And then when we know what to look at, we know what to see. God says, listen, seek after me, and I will show you amazing things. And he gives us his word. He gives us his Bible that all we have to do is take off our shelf and dust off, and he will reveal himself to us. Jeremiah says this: you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Proverbs 2:6 says, for the Lord grants wisdom. His every word is a treasure of knowledge and understanding. God wants to give you and I wisdom. And in Proverbs 2, he says 2 things are going to happen if you follow me. 1, here's what happens if you follow me and seek wisdom, and here's what happens if you don't. And what amazes me, with all the knowledge we have, with all the resources we have, we still continue to make the same mistakes, the same foolish choices. And I just wrote down a list. It doesn't, we know it's not good to drink and drive. We know it's wrong to steal. We know it's wrong to cheat. We know it's wrong to lie. We know it's wrong to view pornography online. We know it's wrong to neglect our kids or to ignore our spouse. And yet we continue to do these things. We continue to make it. And then, listen, your list may be different, or you may be able to add 20 more things, or you may sit there and say, I don't do half those things. I don't know. But I do know this, that we continue to make silly choices. We continue to make foolish decisions, not using the knowledge that we have, not using the knowledge that we have received and transforming that into wisdom. Making foolish choices has the potential to ruin everything you and I have worked so hard for. Everything you and I have worked towards. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just some of the benefits. So basically what I did is I just read through Proverbs 2 and just started underlining what jumped out at me as a benefit. So here are some of the benefits. Or here's Proverbs chapter 2. It says this, starting in verse 7. He grants good sense to the godly, his saints. He is their shield, protecting them and guarding their pathway. He shows how to distinguish right from wrong, how to find the right decision every time. For wisdom and truth will enter the very center of your being, filling your life with joy. You will be given the sense to stay away from evil men who want you to be their partners in crime. So the first one that jumped out at me was good sense. You know, when you seek wisdom, you start to have good sense, or we would call it common sense. And I'm sure you would agree with me, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's not very common these days. You know, common sense isn't common. Good decision-making, practical decision-making. How do we handle certain situations? How to respond? And a couple of things. I just looked up the word sense in a dictionary, and here's what it says. Here's the meaning. Intelligence, brains, intellect, wisdom, logic, good judgment. How to have good judgment. You know, and again, I'm trying not to go back to being a youth pastor, but so many of us don't have good judgment. You know, so many teenagers struggle with good judgment and how to use practical reasoning. And when it comes to a decision that we're going to make, and sometimes even us as adults, we struggle with wrapping our head around practical sense. And on Friday, you know, my wife was reading, I left my notes in my office, and she stopped by to say hi, and she was reading my notes to make sure I didn't mess anything up, or where she needed to correct me, she could. So she was reading over my notes, and she said, thank you so much for not using me as an example for common sense. And I said, babe, you're welcome, because I have wisdom. All right? Granted, you are the smartest girl I know. I mean, the way she comprehends and the way she can take stuff and read it and know it. But when it comes to finding her way out of a parking lot, it ain't happening. You know, and so I said, listen, I have wisdom, so I will not use you as an illustration. But then you read in 1 Kings, Solomon wrote 1 Kings, and he talks about where he has to judge between two women. They both gave birth recently, and then one of the babies died in the night. So that mom went and switched babies with the other mom and took the living baby. And so obviously when that mom woke up, she was upset, and they got into a disagreement, and they were before the king so he could judge fairly and do all that. And so he asked them, is this your baby? And the one mom said yes. And he said, is this your baby? And the other mom said yes. And he said, all right, only one thing to do. Bring me my sword. We're going to cut this baby in half, and you each can have half. You know, and so the one mom said, all right, if I can't have him, no one can. And the other mom said, well, let her have the baby. I'd rather her have him and he lives. And Solomon said, okay, give the baby to the mom that was willing to give him up, because she's the one who truly loved him. And, you know, I'm thinking, man, that's amazing. I wish I had that kind of wisdom. You know, and I'm going to confess something right now. I love Dr. Phil. I don't know where he is biblically standing, but he just says smart stuff every now and then. I'm thinking, man, I wish I would have thought of that. You know, and so when it comes to having common sense and making good decisions and how to make good choices and how to protect ourselves, because that's the next one, protecting us, shielding us. God says, listen, if you seek after me, I will shield you, I will protect you, I will guard your path. That's amazing that the creator of the universe wants to walk before you and protect your path. And that he wants to be your shield. So no matter what someone shoots at you, no matter what someone says to you, no matter what someone tries to do to you, he's going to protect you. He's going to set up a barrier. He's going to set up a way to deflect those things. And I remember I was a freshman in high school, and I was sitting in social studies class. I was in the back row because that's where all the smart kids sat. And I was looking out the window. The bell hadn't rung, so class hadn't started. It was like in between. And my brother's best friend's sister was out there talking to a guy. I mean, I think he was like a fifth turnaround senior. I mean, it was ridiculous. He should have graduated college, never mind high school. And so they're talking, and he hits her. All right? So I run out there, all right, and I give him my 1-2 combo, which would have normally knocked out any other person alive. All right? So I hit him one in the stomach, and he bends over, and I hit him once in the face. And I'm sorry for the violence. If you have your kids in here, you can cover their ears or bring them to children's ministry, whatever you like. But anyways, here's what happens. He looks at me, takes his lip off of his tooth. Yes, I put his lip through his tooth, or his tooth through his lip. He looked at me like I did nothing to him. You know what I did? I ran. All right? I'm thinking, where am I going to go? Because this was before we had cops in our schools. All right? I'm thinking, I got to get to a teacher who can protect me from this guy. All right? So in our school was kind of set up like a U, and I was at the top part of one U. I had to run all the way around the bottom of the U and back up the top so I could get to Mr. Riker. He was my homeroom teacher. He was a big rugby player. I knew he could protect me. So with my cat-like reflexes, like with my gazelle speed, I was moving. All right? I'm telling you, I kid you not, I was hurdling people, jumping down flights of stairs because this guy wanted to kill me. All right? So I finally, I'm about 30 yards away from the classroom, and I'm like, Mr. Riker, and the guy catches me, turns me around, lays me out. I'm just sitting there waiting to start getting beat up more, and Mr. Riker breaks it up, and this guy is giving me all his choice words on what he's going to do to me later. You know what I did? I called my big brother. I called, John, this guy is beating me up, and Tom, his sister, da-da-da. So you know what happened that afternoon? My brother, his buddy Tom, and like 10 of their buddies came to school. It was amazing. All right? It was absolutely amazing. They gently talked to that kid. It worked out well. All right? For a week, they walked me back and forth to school. You know, and it was cool because I felt I could do anything. All right, my big brother was going to protect me. He was going to watch out and make sure no one bothered me. He was going to make sure no one messed with me anymore. And the word started to spread. And this is what happens when you grow up on the mean streets of Springfield, Massachusetts. It wasn't voted the worst city to live for nothing. All right, and so we, you know, so he would walk, and the word started to spread. All right, don't mess with him, or you're going to have to deal with his brother and all his friends. And that gave me a lot more confidence than it should have. All right, and so we have the creator of the universe wanting to protect you and I, wanting to walk before you and I, wanting to make sure you have what you need to move forward. And here's what he does. He not only wants to protect you from others, but he wants to protect you from yourself. All right? Psalm says this, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. God wants to protect you and I from ourselves because we have the tendency to mess stuff up, which is the next one. Next point is he shows us how to distinguish right from wrong. And in Proverbs, look at verse 9 again. It says he shows us how to distinguish right from wrong, how to find the right decisions every time. That's an amazing verse. The fact that you and I can find the right decisions every time. Because here's the lie we tell ourselves. Here's the lie, you know, we tell ourselves, well, I don't need to stress because it's not a big decision. You know, only the big decisions have the tendency to ruin my life. Listen, that's not the case. It's the little decisions that you and I make that make us okay making the wrong big decision. All right? It's when you and I start to make poor choices that leads us up to the life of making the big mistake. And so when we sit back and sit here, have you ever asked yourself, how did I get to this point? How did I get so far away from where I wanted to be? I never in a million years expected me to be here where I am in life. But yet it's the little decisions, the little gradual decisions that we have made that led us to the point we're at. And, you know, it's amazing on how if you've ever looked at a compass, and if you wanted to go, you know, 20 degrees north, and you went 20 degrees, and your plan to go 20 degrees north, and you accidentally went 18 degrees north, just off by a couple, you're in two different spots. You know, 2 miles down the road, you could literally be miles away of where you were supposed to be. I mean, just by being off a little bit. And when you and I start to make poor choices, you know, no one ever says, I'm going to throw my marriage down a drain. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to break my wife's heart and crush my kids. But we sit there and say, well, it's okay to flirt. It's no big deal. It doesn't hurt anybody until it becomes an affair. Or it's okay if I just need to borrow a couple dollars from my company because, one, my boss should be paying me more, and they'll never notice. I'll put it back in next paycheck. Well, something comes up, and now it's more money, and you can't pay it back. You know, it's the little decisions that make us comfortable with the big decisions. And so if we don't realize that God needs to be a part of that, and you know another great thing about Saturday mornings? How about this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? I mean, again, just a nugget of growing up in the 80s or the 70s. But you know what? No one wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to throw my life away and be addicted to drugs or alcohol. Listen, people don't say that. They make poor little choices throughout their lives that lead them to the place we get. And if we don't learn how to use wisdom in making decisions, yes or no, right or wrong, we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle. And so so listen, if you've ever had to convince yourself that something was right, that's probably the first red flag that it's wrong. So when you and I are talking ourselves into something, well, it's okay because they do it, or it's okay because that person did. Listen, that's not the case. All right? That's not the case. The Holy Spirit is great at helping you and I guide and helping you and I make the correct choice and making the best choice and making a choice for our lives, because it's the little decisions that is going to help us make the correct big decisions. And when you and I compare ourselves to our neighbors, listen, one of two things happen. One, I'm doing great, or one, I'm doing horrible. And God says, listen, you compare yourself to what I told you, my word, not your neighbors, not what someone else is doing. You compare ourselves to God. And then when you start to do that and you start to learn how to make the right choices, he says this, I will fill you with joy, because verse 10 says, for wisdom and truth will enter the very center of your being, filling your life with joy. When you start to make the right decisions, when we start to make the right decisions, it is amazing the way God can start to work in our lives. When we start to make the simple decisions. Listen, they're not going to be easy all the time. They're going to be difficult. All right, they're going to be tough, but the joy that you get to experience afterwards is amazing. And the joy that you get to experience because of making the right choices and the benefit of that is incredible. Last summer, our family went to a family reunion out in New Jersey. We went to my grandma's house, and we were there. We get in there, and it must have been 130 degrees in her house. The paint was melting. She had a space heater blowing on her. It was ridiculous. So I called my uncle who lives next door. I said, Uncle, you got to come and fix Grandma's air conditioner. It's like 130 degrees in here. So he comes over and starts working on the air conditioner. I said, all right, well, we can't feed the boys here. We got to go get dinner somewhere. Let's go somewhere. These are the words I said, fast and cheap. All right? I don't feel like spending a lot of money, and I'm tired. So we go past all the fast and cheap restaurants to the Asian buffet, which is only a mere $15 a head. All right, and don't get me wrong, I got my 3 boys. They're not going to eat that much food, so I'm already frustrated about that because my uncle doesn't listen to nothing. All right, so anyways, we finally get there, and as we're walking, he's like, oh, I forgot my wallet, which even makes it worse. So we're walking through the parking lot, and this is the setup because it's burned into my memory. My uncle was standing here. I was standing here holding Grayson. My youngest son and Landon, our oldest son, was standing here, and he picks up a rock and says, look at this skipping stone, Dad. Right across, and it just skipped. Didn't skip. I mean, it was a great throw. Hopped over the curb, hit a 5x10 sheet glass window on the bottom corner. Listen, I'm his baseball coach. I know his aim is not that good, all right? He's right here. I'm giving him a hard time. All right, so we're sitting there, and I'm like, Landon, don't throw rocks in the park. And that thing just turned into a spider web. That's my sound effects for spider web windows. And then it just went woof, right out. I mean, it fell right out to a bazillion pieces. And you know what my first thought was? Who saw this? I kid you not. I'm looking for cameras. I'm thinking we could get back in this car and leave, and no one would know. You know, that was my first thought. And I just see the dread of look on his face, looking at me like, that was so bad. You know? And so we get there, and my uncle's like, what just happened? And I'm like, and I hear what I'm thinking, what should I say that's not incriminating? You know, how do I explain this without saying we did it? And so my wife walks up and says, what happened? And Landon starts bawling. Oh, I'm like, Landon threw a rock. And so the people come out, and then my uncle's like, well, that's why they got insurance. And I'm like, good point. That's why they got insurance. We shouldn't have to pay for this. It was a mistake. You know, if they want to arrest Landon, they can take him. That's fine. You know? And so I'm starting to think, you're right. You know, so we're talking with the company or the owners, and then my uncle comes over and says, you guys got insurance. You don't need to talk to that. And he's starting to be obnoxious. And so my wife, you know, not the pastor, I was ready to bolt out of there in a heartbeat. All right, so my wife says, listen, we will accept responsibility for this. We have always told our boys that you will accept responsibility, you will accept the consequences for your actions, and you will move forward. Then I said, yeah, what she said, you know. And I said, it's an expensive consequence, and it's a long lesson we'll be learning. But the joy that we have now as a family, the fact that we get to look back at that and say, listen, we did do what was right. It was an expensive lesson. We're just now about to pay it off. But it was something that we've learned over time that we will accept responsibility. We will, you know, again, it's very easy to tell your kids one thing, and it's very hard to live another. And so now, you know, a good almost a year later, now we have the joy to look back at that and giggle. All right, maybe not so much that weekend, because I tell you, one more family member said something about that, it was going to be bad. But it was, it was just the joy of learning from our mistakes and the joy of having victory over something that we struggled with. The joy of being able to look at something and say, you know what? That no longer has the bondage on me that it used to. Because of the decisions I'm making, now I can have the joy that I feel. And so when you and I start to have that joy, the next thing is we can look at is how to stay away from evil people. The next part of that passage was to stay away from evil people because they want you to be their partners in crime. No one ever wants to do something wrong alone. You ever notice that? And I'm sure you can look back and think of the people that you may have grown up with or the friends that you have had that may not have been the best influence on you growing up. All right, and if you really can't think of that person, it may have been you. You may have been the bad influence on other people. All right, I had the gift of being able to come up with the dumb ideas and then letting everybody else put them into practice. All right, and so there are people in our lives that we just know are bad influences on us. And parents, I'm sure you can think of some friends that are in your kids' lives that you know are negative influences. And again, remember like I said earlier, remember when we were kids, when someone called my house, you got one of my parents most likely, or you probably got 2 or 3 people most likely, and then you finally got to me. So my mom knew who all our friends were. Nowadays, your phone rings in your pockets, and as parents, we barely know who our kids are hanging out with. And so let me say to you parents, you got to be aware of who your kids are spending time with. You got to be aware of the people who are influencing your kids and your children and your teenagers and knowing what's going on. There's nothing wrong with you answering your kid's phone. There's nothing wrong with you scanning your kids' text messages. And if you're not, listen, you need to be. And for you teenagers, if that frustrates you, listen, that's okay. But that's what you got to deal with. Because your parents love you the most out of anyone in this world. And if you can't trust their wisdom and their guidance for you, then something's wrong. All right? Because, again, they're the ones who are going to be standing next to you when something bad happens. I promise you, not the buddies, not the friends. And I will say this a million times over. The people you try to impress for your 4 years of high school, once you graduate, they're gone. All right? They are gone. And you ask any freshman in college right now if I'm lying to you. All right? Listen, the people you have spent so much time, once that high school is gone, they're gone. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or they were bad. It's just different circumstances, different life stages. And so is that. So the people, but you know who's there? Your parents. And so parents, listen, it is your responsibility to be aware of who your kids are friends with. Because the people, even as adults, the people that we allow to speak into our lives, that's a privilege. All right, the people we allow to influence us, that's a privilege. And we shouldn't give that away very lightly. All right, we shouldn't allow just anybody to speak into our lives. This should be someone, one, we know who loves us, and we know who cares about us, and we know that they want the best for us. And if they can do those 3 things, then it may be okay to allow them to speak in your life. Because Scripture is clear, when it comes to wisdom and when it comes to making good choices, you can't let the wrong influences in. And now someone may be sitting there saying, well, as believers and as Christians, aren't we supposed to love everybody? Listen, yes, you love everybody. But on the other side of that coin, if someone is a negative influence on you as opposed to, or instead of you being a positive influence on them, that's not a healthy relationship. Or if they are dragging you down more than you are lifting them up, that is not a healthy relationship. You need to protect yourself from that. All right? That is not sinning. That is not neglecting the world. That is using wisdom. All right? You, at the bottom line, at the end of the day, you have got to do what is best for your walk with the Lord. You have got to do what is best for you when it comes to the people you allow to speak into your lives. And then when you are spiritually in a better place, then you can take risks and put yourself in those situations because you have a better foundation to stand on. But if your foundation is made out of sand and you're trying to pull someone up spiritually speaking and they're pulling you down instead, you're going to struggle. All right? You're going to struggle. So when it comes to using wisdom, we got to know the people that we allow influence on. We got to know who we allow to influence our lives. And that's huge. Out of the 5 things that we look at, we kind of wrapped up 5 things. And those are the 5 benefits when it comes to what happens when you seek wisdom. And then he gives us kind of a short one for consequences for not seeking wisdom. Proverbs 2 says this, follow the steps of the godly instead and stay on the right path. And this is great. For only good men enjoy life to the full. Evil men or unwise men lose the good things they might have had, and they themselves shall be destroyed. I mean, he kind of wraps it up in a nutshell right there. You're about to lose everything you got, and you may be destroyed. I mean, God says, listen, you seek after wisdom, and here's the list of amazing things you will have. If you choose not to seek after wisdom, you're going to lose it all and be destroyed. How many people have you seen destroy their lives because they made foolish choices? How many people have you saw lose everything because of foolish choices, not using the knowledge they had? They knew what the consequences would be. We just don't care sometimes. And so when it comes to making foolish choices, we got to seek after God. We got to search him out. We got to make sure we are growing in our walk. Because if the only time we are growing spiritually is on a Sunday here in this room, you're spiritually starving the other 6 days a week. And that's not good. That's not healthy. You need to be growing spiritually the other 6 days a week. So what I did here, to wrap up, we'll end with this. I just wrote down a few ways for you and I to seek out God. There's nothing crazy about them. There's no trickery. It is literally something you can do still sitting in the seat you're in. And the first one is we have so much knowledge at our fingertips, like we were saying when we started. Using that knowledge is great. The internet is amazing. Cell phones are amazing. It still blows my mind that I can pick up my cell phone, driving down the highway at 65 miles an hour, and call someone on the other side of the country. Blows my mind. All right, but that tool is amazing when it's used properly. You can download the Bible app. It's literally called the Bible app. It has it has the Bible on there. You can listen to the Bible if you don't want to read it, or if you're driving. You can get a reading plan. You can get a devotional in the app. It's just amazing. So use the technology that you have at your fingertips. There is no reason someone should ever walk up and say, well, I can't go to that church because they don't feed me, spiritually speaking. We got so many resources. All you got to do is sit down in front of your computer screen, and you got a million spiritual resources at your fingertips to help you grow spiritually. There came a time where my kids, and I'm sure your kids as well, that they no longer wanted a bottle. They no longer wanted baby food. They wanted to feed themselves. And as we grow spiritually, we should learn how to feed ourselves. And now, I'm not saying it's not the church's responsibility to put tools in your hand. That's what we do on Sunday morning, and that's what we're doing right now. But it's also our responsibility to start using those tools and to run with them. So download a Bible app. Another thing you can do is just what I did here with this message. I literally just started underlining and taking notes. And you probably sitting there thinking, yeah, we know you didn't do much. We were listening to it. But just start taking notes and underlining and trying to learn from it, and just how does it apply to your life, and how can you adapt it to where you are and what life stage you're in, and just read through it. Just do something simple as that. The next one is on our website. If you go to parkvalleychurch.com and go to our Change tab up top, you can download our 30-day devotional. It's literally just 30 pages of information, and you can sit there and you can figure out, what's that saying? If you do something for 21 days, it becomes a habit. So you get this 30-day devotional. It'll give you the chapter to read. It'll explain how to apply it to your life, and it'll give you a few things to pray about. It's a 15-minute time that you need to spend with God. How do you do that? Just start. 15. Let's be honest. 15 minutes is nothing. We spend longer than that looking for our car keys in the morning. We spend longer than that putting an outfit together. And so for you and I to spend 15 minutes with God a day is not a long time. That is nothing. If we just took 1/10 of the time we spend on our phone or spend on the computer or Facebook or social media and spend that with God, shoot, that would revitalize our prayer life. And so just like any other relationship, if I only talk to my wife once a week, it's not going to be a healthy marriage. And if I only spend time with God one day a week, it's not going to be a healthy relationship and a healthy growing relationship. So look online at that. Join a small group. I understand your time is limited. All right? But the bottom line is we make time for what is important to us. We find time for the things that we value. And so if it's spending time with God, and I'll be the first one to say, sometimes I dread going to small group thinking, oh, I got to leave the house. I'm tired. I don't want to go anywhere. But then when I get there, it's amazing. Living life with other believers is absolutely amazing, and having those relationships. So I challenge you to do that. Go to the Christian bookstore. They have a whole section on devotionals, on how to start a quiet time, how to start a relationship with Jesus. That's an amazing thing. And if you're still struggling, let me tell you this. Just fill out that card in your program. Drop it in the offering basket when we collect it in a little bit, or bring it to the info table, or you can come back and hand it to me. Listen, put a card in there and say, Kevin, call me. I will call you, and we will talk through this. All right, this isn't something you have to struggle with on your own. We can put a plan together. It just takes a matter of time seeking something out. It takes a matter of time of putting some urgency into it. But whatever you got to do something. we have got to move some way and search somehow. And let me say this: I have no idea where anyone is spiritually speaking. All right, you may sit there and say, "Well, I'm already doing a 3-hour devotion every morning." Listen, you are far better off than I am. All right, you can preach next time. But we have got to start somewhere. All right, just spend some time with God. Spend some time seeking after Him. Find a way to get into your Word and search for Him, because He's moonwalking right in front of us. I mean, He literally set the moon in place. I was driving here this morning and got a little bit early, and the moon was out still, and the sun was coming up. It was cool. I mean, God has put the cosmos in place, and sometimes we're searching in all the wrong places, and He is just showing us how amazing He is. So let me challenge you to seek Him out. And let me just switch gears for a second, because someone may be here today, and you're just seeking for something. You haven't given your heart to Jesus yet. Let me challenge you. That's something you can do today. That's something you can do before we leave here today. And it's as simple as saying a prayer for me. So if you've come to church seeking Jesus, listen, you've come to the right one. Because in a second, I'm going to pray a prayer, and you are welcome to pray that with me. And all it is you saying to Jesus, thank you.